This morning, we continue on in a study on this issue of the second key of particular systems of thought in our mind, that we have to transform our mind. I want you to turn to Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, and I want to talk a little bit about this morning. But what I want to do, this is sort of an evangelism Sunday in the sense that I'm teaching a discipleship message, but we want you to know that we want you to be saved. If you don't know Christ, we want you to be saved. But I want you to go beyond that. And you know, I don't know how you guys feel, but sometimes I feel like that the church is its worst enemy. That we hinder ourselves more than the world ever thought about hindering us. Like, for those of you who have been here for a while, has the world ever busted in here on a Sunday and like told me I couldn't preach something? No. Have they ever hauled me off to jail? Not yet. Not yet. Maybe there's going to be a day that comes, but not yet. So how is it that we're hindered? And as I considered that thought, I was lost for a long time in my life. I got saved whenever I was 27 years old and didn't really have a church background previous to that. And so there was a lot of confusion to me about I didn't know anything about church at all. And whenever I did start coming, I'll tell you what I did know about. There was a family that lived down the road from us, and they were atheists. And I thought, boy, that's weird. I'd never heard of an atheist. I didn't know what they looked like, what they acted like, but there was a family that lived down the road from us. They were atheists, and I thought, well, I don't really want to hang out with them because I do believe in God even though I have no clue who He is. There were some people that I knew that were Jehovah's Witnesses. You know what I know about a Jehovah's Witness? Let me tell you what I know. If you've known one, you've known them all. You want to know why? Because what they believe is what they believe. And the Jehovah's Witness Church or Kingdom Hall, they teach a certain set of doctrine, period. You don't get the right to interpretation. This is what it is. I've known some Mormons. You know what I know about Mormons? If you've met a Mormon, you met them all. Why? Because their doctrine is their doctrine. That's what it is. When they train you as a Mormon, you're trained this way. That's what it is. That's the way it is. I've known some Muslims. And you know what I know about Muslims? If you've met one, you've met them all. That what their doctrines are, what their teachings are, and what their pillars are, that's what it is. There isn't something different to it. But if you meet a Christian, you've met one in a billion. Because we are all different. And we all believe in something different, and we all operate in our own convenience, and we choose our churches on the basis of what we like, not on the basis of transformation, but on the basis of what we like, what we're comfortable in. It's always amazing to me. We have a class called Get Informed, and we started doing this Get Informed class because we said, we had a lot of people that join our church, and later on say, I didn't know y'all believed that, and so we're out. It's like, well, instead of messing with our membership roles, let's do a Get Informed class, and then we can tell you who we are, and you can decide whether you want to join or not. And we felt like that was better. That was easier. That way you know and you're not hurt. And so we've had some that have left, and you know, it's always heartbreaking when somebody leaves, but the things they leave for are probably can't use those kind of words. Babyish. Do you know that it's really, really easy to get to heaven in a Christian church? Because you don't have to do anything. Jesus did it all. And all you have to do is receive what He did, and you're good to go. That's all you got to do. Now, there's a way that you do it. It's real simple, but that's all you got to do. Do you know that it's real hard to get to heaven if you're a Muslim? It is so hard to get to heaven because you got to do so many things that the easiest way to get to heaven is to commit an act of jihad, because if you do that, killing the infidels, it's an automatic ticket right in. If you ever wanted to know why there's so many acts of jihad, it's because it's a ticket to heaven and 70 virgins. These guys, I don't know what the girls get, but the guys get 70 virgins. And that's true. An act of jihad, you blow yourself up or kill yourself up in an act of jihad, you get right in. And isn't it amazing that people that have nothing really to believe in, and I don't mean that in a harmful way, but it's amazing that y'all would kill yourself to get into heaven, and yet we wouldn't humble ourselves to get into heaven. I wonder how many of us are going to make it. I don't know. I'm telling you that Jesus loves you today, and he would love to save you, and I'd love to help you. But as we work forward today, I want you to look in Romans chapter 12 and verse 1 and 2. And I want to say this to you, that when God saved us, there's more to it than salvation. I think this is the problem of the Christian church, is that we're so enamored with salvation, and we should be. But that's not the end of it. You know what Jesus said he was? Not only was he the way, the truth, and the life, but you know what the major thing that Jesus said he was? He said he was the door. How many of y'all live in the doorway of your house? Do you know how dumb that is? To live in the doorway? Jesus said, I am the door to the sheepfold. If anybody's going to come in, they got to come by me. I'm the door. And I came to give you life, and that life more abundantly. But we got to go in. And so we've kind of messed up a little bit in understanding that, hey, salvation is awesome. It's great. You're saved, got the gift of the Spirit of God. Now you have the capacity to learn and be transformed, but you got to go in and be transformed. You've got to do it. But it's hard for us to do it because in our modern day situation, in the general church of Jesus Christ in the world, we're more of an audience type situation rather than a participatory situation. We're not really the body of Christ. We are the audience of Christ. And that's a challenge. So we want to change that a little bit. And as we move into this second key, and that second key is that our biggest issues are our systems of thought. And I gave you several of them for the last 2 weeks. But today I want to talk about how do we start to overcome those things? How do we start to move around those things? And the Bible teaches us in Romans 12, 1 and 2, that there are two major areas in our life that we have to overcome. So what does he say? He says, I beseech you, I beg you, brethren, that you offer your body as a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Here's what God says. The first thing you got to tackle is that body. Before you ever mess with the mind, you're going to have to tackle the issues of the body. Does anybody, don't raise your hand, but does anybody have any issues of the body? Like my body has some issues, especially as it gets older. It doesn't work right anymore. You know, I injure myself by sleeping. I really do. I have so many injuries in my body from gymnastics and all kinds of things, just from beating up the joints. And now, when I look back, how foolish and unwise I was trying to show off either for girls or guys or schools or whatever to prove that I could jump off a cliff or run in front of a car or get run over by a motorcycle or whatever. And at the time, I thought, man, these people probably think I'm some kind of genius. You know, you look back now, and I know what y'all were thinking. What an idiot. You know what I mean? You don't realize that until it's too late. But then you wake up in the morning, I can't even stand up straight, man. My back is killing me. My joints kill me. You walk up to the top of the steps, you're like, I can't breathe. What's going on? I can't breathe. Why? Well, I just walked up the steps. Can y'all hang on a second? You know, I used to run all over the place. And so God says, you've got to take care of that body. And I'm not really dealing with the body today, but I got to be honest with you. When we look at our body issues, here's one of the things I've taught you guys. If you feel well, you will do well. If you don't feel well, you don't do well. Right? So, man, that body is a big deal. It really is a big deal. Take care of the body. But secondly, in verse 2, he says this, and because he's like, hey, don't separate these two. You take care of your body. And there's plenty of people in our own congregation that would be only too happy to help you take care of that body. There's a bunch of them around here that would love to help you. He says, and do not be conformed to the world. That's a key phrase. Do not be conformed to the world. There's something that God identifies. He says, I don't want you to have any part with this. Just liken it to this. Don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't do that. Over here he says, don't be conformed to this world. He's telling us something he doesn't want us to do. But rather, be transformed. How do you get transformed? By the renewing of your mind. What happens if you renew your mind? Then you can prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Then you can know that. But there's got to be a transformation before you're ever going to figure that out. So I got all kinds of people say, well, this God thing doesn't work. Did you transform your mind? No. Well, you're never going to know. You're never going to know. So you have to push out there a little bit. Well, I want to do this morning as we deal with this issue of the mind. The mind is this weird thing. It is something that every one of you possess and you know nothing about it. The medical community knows very little about our minds. Very little. Now, they know some amazing things about it, but when they start talking percentages of what they know about it, it's in like the 5 percentile range of what they actually know about it. 4 billion. Did you hear that? 4 billion neurotransmitters in your brain. 1.5 kilos of gray matter that looks like mush, and it can store pictures, memories, speech, intellect, knowledge, wisdom, understanding. But to look at it, it's like, I don't even know what that is, right? No wires in there. Those neurotransmitters got to fire. There's synapses that run all through. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen for that thing to work right. We don't even know what a thought is. We don't know what an idea is. How does it stay? How does it stick? How can you go, where is it at? Like, if you were to cut into, you can't see it, right? So where is it? It's a weird thing, this thing called the mind. And yet God talks about it. He talks about it. Now here's the challenge of it. Where is it? What is it? What is he talking about? Where does he talk about it? So I'm going to give you just a handful of scriptures where God talks about this issue of the mind, and he refers to it as the inward man. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 16, God says this to the Apostle Paul. He says, "Therefore, we do not lose heart. Even though our outward man is perishing, yet our inward man is being renewed day by day." So I don't know if you guys know this or not, but your mind does not age. It never ages. Your body ages, but you don't. That's why we see guys hobbling around, their knees are all blown out because they're 50 and they're playing softball because their mind says, no, I'm 18. And the body says, well, you may be 18, but that knee is 50. And it's going down, right? So the mind doesn't age, but it's that inward man, and it's being renewed. Wouldn't it be nice if our bodies could be renewed every day? But they're not. They're decaying away every day. It's the inner man that's being renewed. Ephesians 3:16 says this. God says, I want to pray, Paul said, I pray that God would grant you according to the riches of his glory to be strengthened with might through his Spirit in the inner man. So this inner man thing that he's got going on is speaking to this part of our mind that we need to look at. Colossians 3:10 says this, and having put on the new man who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him who created him. So in other words, the source of what we're going to renew with is associated with the person of God, with who he is, because who he is has everything to do with who you are, because you were created by him. So when we start talking about who we are, we have to take into consideration who he is, and we need to learn from that. Now, here's the deal. I told you before, and I'm teaching you, so I'm not preaching to you. So sorry, I'm not going to excite you today, but I'm going to teach you something. And I hope that when you leave out of here, I'll have given you something that we can walk away with and be able to use as a tool to talk about. I've told you before that every action is preceded by a thought. Nothing happens that you don't think about first. Even if you don't think about it consciously, you think about it before it happens. I'm moving my hands and stuff like that, and I'm saying words, and though it's happening almost simultaneously, the thought comes before the action. Well, that's true, but before the thought, there's a picture. There's a picture. I'm going to help you all with some communication. There's a picture. So, for example, if I were to say right now, I want every one of you to think about your car or the car you rode here in, whether it's, you have one or it's your spouse or whatever. Think about your car. Now, when I think about my car, I can picture in my head this dark gray 2016 Acura RDX, little SUV. Got 78,000 miles on it. Got it real cheap. So, but that's probably not what you're thinking. Some of you are thinking Lincoln Town Car, Volkswagen Beetle. Some of you are thinking Beater. You're not thinking of the name of the car. You're thinking of the name of the car. I'm driving Charlie. If you're driving a car that has a name, that's a Beater, right? Come on, Charlie, let's go. So when you think of that, if I say think of your house, then you have a picture in your mind of your house, not mine. right? If I were to say, when preachers or speakers, they give illustrations, you have to use somebody else's photo album. Because you ever talk to somebody and they're talking from their photo album? Their pictures? If I were to say, hey guys, the most amazing thing in my bedroom, there's a, in my bedroom there's a nightstand right there, and right on top of that nightstand, you know that amazing thing that's sitting right there? Y'all know what I'm talking about? And you're like, no. How do you not know? I see it every day. See, I'm using my photo album to try to talk to you, which is why you're confused. You want to become a good communicator, you need to pick up somebody else's photo album, whomever you're talking to, and use their photo album. And then you'll be able to communicate. So let's say that somebody has a little, I don't know if they're really dogs, they're animals. I don't know what you call this thing. It's like a Yorkie. That's not really a dog. That's a puff of wind. I walked in the house one day and this dog, I thought it was, jumped on me. I said, is there mosquitoes in here or what? What was it? It was a dog. It's like this big. If you have a Yorkie, God love them. Okay, I love Yorkies. But here's the thing. If you have a dog, where was I even going with that? What's that? My house. Look, when we're talking about something, if you had a little Yorkie and we talk dog and somebody else has got a Mastiff, do you realize they're thinking something different? Like they're thinking something totally different. So we have to be able to use your photo album, and we got to be familiar with your photo album to communicate with you, which is why we must educate you. Because as we educate you, we gain a more common understanding, and we can go further and deeper together as a group of people. But I've got to learn to use your photo album, and so what I want to do is I want to add a photo to your photo album today so that it's in all of our photo albums, okay? Can we do that? So I want to ask a question. When you think of the mind, what mental picture comes to your head? If one, you might not have one, but if one does come to your head, it's probably a brain, a picture of a brain. Well, your brain is no more your mind than your heart is your heart. I mean, obviously, the organ of the heart that pumps blood is not, you don't feel with the organ of your heart. The Bible is speaking very specifically of something different. So when the Bible speaks about the mind, it's not speaking about the brain. If it was speaking about the brain, whenever the brain died, so would you. But that's not the case. You travel on into eternity. All of your thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything that go on into eternity. So I want to give you a picture of the mind so that we can work with this thing that we need to transform. And we need to recognize that that mind has two parts to it. It has an inner man and it has an outer man, and God specifically speaks to the inner man. So I'll put this picture up on the board because this is the picture that I want you to think of whenever I'm talking to you about the mind, okay? Now that's a weird picture, but what it is this big part right here is your mind, and the bottom part, the little circle, is your body. Why is the body so small? Because the body's immaterial. The body is the servant to the mind. It does whatever your mind tells it to do unless it's sick, unless there's a miswiring or something going on. But your body is the servant to the mind. So I want you to get familiar with this picture because I'm going to use it a lot as I try to help you understand how do we renew and be renewed in the inner man that is destroying us. Because see, here's what happens. When you're saved, your sins are forgiven, but your mind hasn't changed. Your mind hasn't changed. So you don't change how you act, you don't change how you live, you don't change how you believe, because your mind hasn't changed. And depending on the system of thought that you have inside of you, you will hang on to that thing for dear life. And you'll try to fit in the Christ thought into your system of thought, and that ain't ever going to work. It just will never work because they don't go together. It's either this one or some other that's out there. So you have to see what this is. Now, I want to give you some components that you can fill in so that you can follow along with me. This is, you'll notice over here on this side, that this is a mind that is 5 years old or younger. Probably better said about 4.5, because the reality is, this is what we call the subconscious mind. It's called the subconscious mind because it sits below the consciousness. You know when something's below the consciousness, you know what that means? You don't know it's there. It's below the surface. Do y'all remember subliminal advertising? They'd shoot a Coke or popcorn in a picture that cognitively you saw, but visually you didn't. And they said, you know, people started buying more Coke and popcorn at the movies because they would give you this subliminal advertising because they understood that they could speak to that subconscious mind through subliminal ways and get you to do what they wanted you to do. This is the subconscious mind, but there's some very specific things about this mind. The first thing is that it is what is called, and put it in a box, the emotional mind. The operation of the subconscious mind is 100% in the context of emotions. Not logic, not reason, not information, not knowledge. Emotions. And with those emotions, it pops out feelings. Well, aren't emotions and feelings the same thing? No, they're not. They're not even close to the same thing. An emotion would be happiness, sadness, joy, grief, anger, frustration. Those are emotions. But the feelings that come out can be different. For example, let me just give you two. Let's say that there's a death in your family and you undergo grief. Grief is an emotion. Have you ever noticed that people grieve differently? So one person may be breaking down, crying incessantly, and you can't get them under control. Another person may just be sitting there completely stoic and not saying anything, not doing anything, appear to be completely unaffected. So even though they have the same emotion, they have a different feeling associated with that emotion, and that's going to come from their childhood or something else that's going on, and it will affect the way that they react. Then it affects our relationship with each other because most of us, I told you last week, most of us suffer with the emotional mind. And so here's what happens. Because it is so powerful, because feelings are powerful, right? When you don't feel something, you don't even do anything. Emotions are powerful. So here's what happens. Let's say you're in a grief situation and the person over here is really crying, a person over here is stoic. You know what this person who's crying says about the person who's stoic? They didn't even love them. They didn't even care. They're cold as ice. That might not be true. That's just how they were taught to handle grief. Like boys. Suck it up, boy. Boys don't cry. Right? So when something bad happens to a guy, well, not today. I don't know if we're going to call those boys. But because of that, a situation could happen and you would just be stoic because a different feeling comes out. Well, when those feelings come out, they drive down to the body. They drive down to the body because the body is the place of action. The brain is not the place of action. The brain is the place of thought. And whatever thought comes out of the brain goes down to the body, and then the body carries out whatever function that the brain tells it to carry out. So the body is a place of action, and whatever that action is ultimately leads into a result. Now, we'll come back and talk about results and stuff like that, but not for today. Just want you to see the arrows as they go through, that a thought comes in, it runs through the emotional mind, gets a feeling associated with it, drops down to the body, creates an activity, which results in, it ends up in some kind of result. And this is how we think. Now, you'll notice that this mind is open. It's just like a bowl. It's open. Now, one of the challenges of it being open is that there's nothing to block it. There's nothing to block a thought coming in, okay? And so there's an issue with that. So everything that goes in, goes in. There's nothing to block it. Well, what goes in? Well, I put 4 arrows up there. You could put a bunch. You can figure this out for yourself, but please hear me. From 0 to 4, one of the great challenges of being 0 to 4 years old is that you don't know you're here. You have no consciousness. You're underconscious. You have no idea. The weirdest thing to me is sometimes when people come and, you know, they're here for a while and then they move out of town or something and they have children, and I'll see these kids, and, you know, if you ever talk to a 3-year-old, they seem alive, right? They seem like they're cognizant. They seem like they're real people. But if a person leaves with a 3-year-old child, comes back in 4 or 5 years, and their child is now, say, 7 or 8, and like, hey, going to take you to see Pastor Kenny, and those kids are like, who's Pastor Kenny? They don't remember me. You could have kept them in the nursery from the time they were born until they're 3 years old. If they leave for 2 years until they turn 5, and when they come back, they won't have a clue who you are. Now, if they awaken, they'll remember you, but if you leave before that time, they have no idea who you are. That's the challenge of being this age. As a result of being unconscious, stuff just goes in. Everything goes in. Well, what goes in? Let me give you 4 little thoughts about it. Number 1, whatever your parents tell you. Because obviously, you're born, and then your parents bring you home. Or somebody brings you home that acts like a parent, guardian, something like that. They bring you home, right? And so whatever they teach you is what goes into your mind. And what might they teach you? They might teach you, don't cry, take your shoes off, you don't walk in the house with your shoes on, or, eat with a fork or a spoon or whatever. And they might have very specific things. Like in my home, I taught Andy that if he didn't want to eat broccoli, he did not have to. Now, where do you think that came from? The fact I was the one, I see these advertisements on TV now, some kind of diet thing that tells you, hey, when you were a kid, you were made to eat everything on your plate. Well, I was. They always told me there were starving kids in Africa, and I always had the same response. Well, ship it to them. That didn't go over well, right? Didn't go over well with my daddy. So here's the thing. And then he starts talking about, well, there's starving kids in China. Ship it to them. I don't care. But so, because I had to sit at that table. You had to sit there until you ate everything on that plate. And what was always left on the plate was broccoli. There's more than a bad taste. There's a mental illness that goes along with my broccoli. Okay? Some of y'all, well, you tried it with some cheese? Look, man, I got a mental illness. So you need more than cheese. I need a psychologist. So nonetheless, whatever your parents tell you, go in. It goes in. It goes in. What else? Media. Whatever they see on TV. How many people know of Barney and Big Bird and people like that, Sunday morning cartoons or Saturday morning cartoons, Bugs Bunny, Road Runner, stuff like that? All that media that goes in. Today, it's worse because we've got, all kinds of TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all kinds of stuff, and it's just unfiltered, and so it can go in. Not only that, but our education. We want our kids to be smarter than everybody else's kids, and we know that because we put bumper stickers on our cars that tells us that my smart kid is way smarter than your dumb kid over at this school, and the person that doesn't like that says my kid will beat up your kid at that school, and then we'll see who's the smartest, right? So we go back and forth with that kind of stuff. So whatever education that we're trying to put in, and then we want to make sure, this kid went to this school, but our kid went to this elite school, or they went to a Christian school, or they went to a charter school, or they went to public school, or they went to home school. And so whatever that happens to be, it goes in. It goes in. And then culture. And these are the top 4. And then culture, depending on whether you were born in America, or you were born in Australia, or you were born in Russia, or you were born in Africa, whatever the culture was where you came from, plays into a large role about these deposits that go into your life. Now, looking at that scenario right there, I have a question for you. Just with the information that's on the board right now, what part of that person that's on the board, let's put your name in there. For me, it's going to be Kenny. What part of Kenny is represented, or what part of you is represented on the board? None. This is our challenge. None. What's represented on the board is what your parents taught you, what the media taught you, what the culture taught you, what education taught you, what your neighbors taught you, what your uncle, your aunt, your nephews, your nieces, your church, whatever they taught you. You didn't even know what they were teaching you because you're unconscious. You're totally unaware. It's just going in. And what it created down in this subconscious area is what I call a paradigm. And let me give you a definition of a paradigm. Hopefully you can read it. It's a collection of habits and systems of thought from other people that dictate your thoughts and actions. So isn't it amazing how easily we're still affected by this and still impacted by this? If a famous singer comes out, don't we all, not all of us, but the young kids by and large, want to dress like that singer or sing those songs or be associated with those things or something like that. And we're influenced by, every generation has their different influencers, whether it's singers, athletes, famous people, whatever it happens to be, we're influenced by that. And as a result, we have this paradigm that is, a paradigm doesn't change. It's almost like that it's this ruts that have been run in the ground, and now you're stuck in the rut. Now here's a challenge. This is the subconscious mind. This is before you turn 5 years old, and you don't even know you're alive. But then something happens, and you change age, and this weird thing happens. We know that it does. We don't know when it does. It just does. And we can look back and say, yeah, that happened to me, but you can't tell me what day. Because it's not like, hey, today, Kenny, you're going to wake up. And then I wake up and say, today was my wake-up day. No, you just all of a sudden wake up and let me tell you how I feel. I don't care how old you are. If I were to bring a 5-year-old in here and say, how long have you been here? You know what they would think? Forever. That's how long you think you've been here. Now, you know how old you are. You know you haven't been here forever, but it feels like you've been here forever, doesn't it? You can't think of a time you didn't exist. But it could be the day that you awaken, you feel like you've been here forever. So there's an awakening on the inside that happens, but that awakening on the inside is to the outside world. I call it the age of wonder, where all of a sudden you're like, whoa, check this out. This is a big old gymnasium, or you go outside, the sky's blue. The operative word for this age is why. Why is the sky blue? Why do we have to go to church? Why is he fat? Why is that person ugly? Why do we drive a beater and they drive a Rolls Royce? I mean, whatever it happens to be, they ask all these questions. And here's the challenge, though. Most people get locked in this age. And this can be a terrible situation. This is the part God says, I really need you to renew this because it's not really you. It's not really you. Some of you will remain poor all of your life because you grew up poor, and it's not that you grew up poor. You grew up with a poor mindset, and it's locked. Some of you will never have friends, not because you're unfriendly, not because you couldn't have friends. You grew up with a mindset that you couldn't trust anybody and everybody was after you or something like that. Somebody put that in you. And so now you don't have any friends. Some of you have to judge every person that you're around because you had to have right and wrong. You couldn't recognize, I don't want to do what they're doing, and they get to do whatever they want to do. I'm not accountable to them. I'm accountable to God for me. And so I'm going to promote what I'm doing and where I'm going. And if somebody wants to go a different way, that's their deal. I wish they would go a different way, but I can't do anything about it. And so you get stuck in life because you're always drugged down by what somebody else isn't doing. And you yourself never do anything because you're stuck there. And that's going to be a paradigm that's in you. But when you wake up at 5 years old, let's flip it over, an amazing thing happens. A new mind comes on you. And this new mind, if you look at it, flip it. Oh, I'm sorry. They're back there like, Pastor, you left something out. Sorry, guys. There's 3 things about this subconscious mind you need to be aware of. Okay? Number 1, the subconscious mind cannot reject anything. Okay, because it's not awake, right? Because it's not awake, it has no moral compass to it. So the subconscious mind, a little 3-year-old, your dad says, hey, take this rock and throw it at your sister. The 3-year-old doesn't go, now, Dad, I just really don't think that would be a good thing. Jesus said. No, they don't say that. They're like, really? Can I whack her in the head? Can I drown her? Right? They don't think anything of it. They can't reject anything. Whatever. How is it that some of us taught our kids how to cuss when they were little? Because we knew that they didn't know what we were doing. They can't reject it. It just comes in. And number 2, they must accept everything that comes in. Not only can they not reject it, I don't care what you tell them, it's coming in. That's why we can get little kids to believe in Batman and Superman, and they can fly and stuff like that. And I'm not going to mention the other things that I could mention. You know what I'm talking about. How is it that they can buy into all of that stuff? Because they don't know. They have no moral compass in them. So they cannot reject anything, and they must accept everything. And number 3, they cannot differentiate between what is fantasy and what is reality. They don't know. Today, that's pushing further. We have virtual reality, which is really unreality, and we got people believing things that aren't really true. Now, it's like, are you picking on video games? No, just teach your kids the difference between fantasy and reality, and there ain't nothing wrong with a video game. It's not real. It's not real. There was a show on a long time ago. It was called Splash. Anybody see Splash? It was about a mermaid. Tom Hanks was in it, and he found this mermaid, and he left her at her house, and he came home, and she's watching TV crying. And she's crying because the person on the TV died. And he said, "Oh, honey, no. That's just an actor. They didn't really die." And then she's like, "Really? No, they're not dead. They're just acting." Then she's laughing at it. "Oh, they got shot." Right? When you're a little kid, you can't differentiate between fantasy and reality. If you don't behave, we're going to take you to the river and drop you over the bridge. I used to tell my little brother that. Take you to the Cape Fear River, we're going to throw you over the side of the bridge. He believed it. Why did he believe it? Because I told him when he was a little kid. In order to try to help his behavior, I was doing something very, very wrong to help his behavior, and then he had to pay for it later on in life because it was part of the paradigm that was in him. What a horrible thing. All right, let's move on to the next picture. So now we're going to 5 years old and older, so there's been an awakening. We see the world that's going on, and here's what happens. That open bucket that was there, everything goes in, it just goes in. You can't stop it from going in. Think about it this way. You talk to a little kid, and you tell them, "Hey, you be good today. You get ice cream when you get home." Okay, little kids don't understand the difference between right and wrong. Therefore, they do wrong but think they did right. So when they get home, they're like, "Where's my ice cream?" And you're like, "You don't get any ice cream." "What are you talking about?" "You were bad." "When was I bad?" "You were bad. You're getting no ice cream." How long does it take to no ice cream to run through that brain, through the emotion, through the feeling, into the body, into a full-blown meltdown? A nanosecond, about that fast. Because there's nothing to catch it. It just, right on through. Once you awaken, that cap goes on, and it covers the subconscious, and now it's blocked out. Not only were you unaware of it before, but now it's concealed from you, and you still don't know what's in there. None of you today know what's in your subconscious. You have no idea why you act the way you act. You have no idea why you feel the way you feel. You have some thoughts about it, but it's probably not true. It's been covered up. Now, this mind that's on top, we call it the conscious mind. So now we're operating in something where we're awake and we're aware and we know what's going on and we have memory and we can see it. This conscious mind we call the intellectual mind because it operates on information and education. So we have a mind now that we can put stuff in it. That's why we go to school. That's why we go to college. That's why we do all kinds of stuff, is because we have all of this stuff that's coming in. Now, here's the challenge of this particular mind. This happens around 5 that it locks in. I call it the age of wonder because you're questioning, you're looking at all the stuff that goes on. Let me skirt forward just a little bit just to let you know what might be coming. And that is, the next major phase in a child's life is 11 years old, somewhere between 10 and 11. That age is an age where at 5 they awaken to the reality out here, and at 11 they awaken to the reality that's in here. And they start to have personal conversation with themselves, and they run into a lot of trouble because the person that they awaken to at 11 years old is generally in conflict with the person that was put in them from 0 to 4. And so we have real battles in our mind. If you want to read that battle, read Romans chapter 7, where the Apostle Paul is like, "Man, I've been looking at myself and I recognize, man, I got the law of God, good, it's good. Got the law of man, good, that's all good. I recognize I'm a sinner, so that helps out. I want to do right, that's good. I got all this intellectual stuff, but man, I don't behave right. What's going on? What is going on?" Well, see, here's the challenge. This mind right here, the intellectual mind, it contributes to your life. But that's all it does. That is all it does. Now, we believe it's more than that. That is why we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on education for our children. We spend way more money on educating our children than we do helping them to become a real person. So I want you to think about education for a moment. Some of you, like I said, I could bring in the top financial experts in the world, teach all of y'all how to be a millionaire, a billionaire. And most of you will never do it. You want to know why? Not because you don't have the information. Somewhere down in that subconscious mind, somebody put fear that you'll lose something. Never taught you would gain something. You know, God said this, with whatever measure that you sow, That's the measure that comes back at you. So you know what? All you're doing is, I'm not putting that out there. I'm not putting that out there. I'm not putting that out there. I don't know why God doesn't bless me. Well, He told you how to do it. He told you what to do. In marriage, hey, you're to love your wife, so you're to tell her, and then you're to act on that behalf. And you're like, I don't know why my wife doesn't think I love her. What do you do for her? Well, not much. Right? It's the law of sowing and reaping. We'll talk about that during this time. All it does is contribute to your life. I can tell you guys how to lose weight. And give you exact, precise information on how to lose weight, but you won't do it. Not because you don't have knowledge, but because there's something in that subconscious that tells you you can't. You can't. Isn't it amazing that other people can, but somehow specifically you can't? You got a thyroid disease. Some of you may. I'm not saying that that's not true. But some of you just think, I got a thyroid disease, my body, I'm big boned. I've never seen a big bone skeleton. Have y'all? You ever seen a big bone skeleton? I've seen tall skeletons, but not like, oh man, look at that skeleton. Looks like an elephant leg on that person right there. No, it doesn't look like that. But in your mind, this mind is such a weird thing because if you tell it something, it obeys it. If you tell your mind that you're a nobody, you will always be a nobody. Some of you ought to turn your recorder on and forget that you turned it on, go through a whole day and then play it back. Just make sure that you've locked up your guns. Because when you play it back, you're going to want to shoot yourself when you realize how negative you are. I mean, you really would. If you think about what can't be done, what's not going to be done, how nobody likes you, how everything's bad, just think about that. So it only contributes. The subconscious, which is what I need to delve into, controls you. It controls your life. And here's the problem. You don't know what it is. You don't know what's in there. You don't even know why it's controlling you. There are things that you would think, boy, that makes sense, but you can't do it. You flat cannot do it. You try to move, but you can't. You're locked, and you don't even know why, because there's a paradigm holding you back, and God says, hey, you know what? You can flip information like that. That's easy, right? All you need is a little bit better information. You know how that works. You hear something, that's stupid. Somebody gives you, oh, that's good, and you'll take that. And if you get better information, you'll let that go and you'll go some other way, because you can flip information, no problem whatsoever. What you cannot flip is that emotional thing that's going on in your life. Now, you can, but you're going to have to use your intellectual mind to work to flip the subconscious mind, the emotional mind, and that's a bit of work. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. Let me give you 3 things about this intellectual mind that it does. Number 1, the intellectual mind can accept or reject anything. So when you get this little cap on top where before a thought could just run right on through, well, now you have the ability, and this is where parents really struggle. You notice how sweet your little 0 to 5-year-old kids were? How sweet. They were so sweet. They were so nice. They were so loving. They were so marvelous. And then when they turned 5, all of a sudden they start saying, no. No. Nah. Why? Why do I need to clean up my room? Your room ain't clean, right? You didn't clean up your room. And they mouth off like that. And you're like, what is going on? What's going on is now where used to you could just tell them, now it'll bounce right off. They're like, nope, I got a force field. I don't believe that nonsense. Little Tommy, a 5-year-old little Tommy who's a brilliant genius at work. You, my 40-year-old parents, a moron, but Tommy knows. Right? And they listen to that stuff. They'll bink it right off because they can accept or reject anything that they want to, and they'll do it at their convenience. And here's how they'll do it, by what makes them feel good, because they too are operating by their subconscious. The second thing about the conscious mind, it has the ability to reason. So in other words, now you can't just say junk like you used to say to your kids. I'll tell you what, son, you don't listen to your daddy, I'm going to take you down to the river and I'm going to throw you over the bridge. You can't throw me over the bridge. I'll call 911. I was watching a show the other night, told them how I could take you and put you in jail. I was watching Irreconcilable Differences. This little girl on there, she was in charge of everything. You can't do nothing to me. Right? So they have the ability to reason now. And that's a challenge. Now you're struggling as a parent. What do I do? My kid is crazy. No, your kid's growing. Your kid is maturing. And you have to stay up with them. You've got to know what these challenges are so that we make sure that and my recommendation is that you get your parenting right from the very beginning so you don't have to change anything. Because can I tell you something? Now that your kids have the ability to reason, they're going to go back to stuff that you taught them that wasn't true, that you thought was funny. And here's what you didn't know. When they find out that it wasn't true, they don't believe you anymore. And they don't follow you anymore. That's problematic. And then lastly, the conscious mind has the ability to originate thought, which means this is such an incredible thing. We need this in order to work on this subconscious. But today I just need to get these pieces under our belt. The conscious mind has the ability to originate thought that doesn't presently exist, doesn't currently exist. God gave you this incredible gift called imagination, which allows you to see beyond what's in front of you and to create things that don't currently exist. That's how Steve Jobs created an iPhone or an iPad, or how somebody created an airplane and stuff like that. They were able to imagine and they were able to originate thought. Because we have that ability, see, before in your subconscious mindset, you were just had to drink in the thoughts of everybody else. But now you have this ability to originate thought, and that's a challenge because if that thought is not governed and harnessed by truth, you can go off into Neverland. And that's where we're at today, where we've got a lot of people that are believing things that are completely contradictory to what the truth is. Now, here's what I know. I can't make you do anything. But what I want to do is I really want you to see the reality of what's going on in your mind. So when you think about this picture of your mind, I want you to think about this. Now, back up one, guys, to that other picture. And when you look at this mind thing that's up there, I want you to consider where it had the big opening. Next one, the full mind. When it had the big opening there, when it closed off with the conscious mind that's sitting on top of that, they'll get there in a second. Right there, notice that there's a little trap door over here to one side. Because when you think about something, nothing happens. It is not until you let it slip into your subconscious emotional mind does it happen. You don't do anything you don't feel like doing. And you can let it slip through. That's why if I was a salesman, car salesman or something, man, I'm going to work your emotion. I'm going to work that emotion. I'm going to tell you how good you look in that car. I'm going to tell you what great gas mileage it's got, how you're saving the planet. I'm going to work your emotion. I'm going to work you like a rib. Because today everything is marketing, and they know this. They know this. I'm trying to protect you. Now let me close with this thought. God said in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Let me tell you why he told you to renew your mind. Because you can. God will not tell you to do something that you cannot do. What did he tell you about salvation? He said, hey, if you try to earn your own salvation, it's counted against you as debt. For all of you trying to earn your salvation, God says you're stacking up debt against the day of wrath as you're trying to pay for your own salvation. That's about as straightforward as it gets. He said, nobody comes to the Father unless they come by me, and it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and that, the faith that it takes for you to be saved, doesn't even come from you. Even that is a gift from God. So he's letting you know that, hey, I'm not asking you to save yourself, because you can't. But I'm asking you to transform yourself because you're the only one who can. God's not going to transform you. He will walk with you through this transformation, but he won't do it for you. And he's asking you because you can. So I ask you when you come in again next Sunday that you get prepared as we start moving into some action type situations to start working on the purpose of changing some of these paradigms. And if you can't spell it, it's paradigm. Okay, P-A-R-A-D-I-G-M, paradigm. It's a paradigm. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking. And we got to bust out of the ways of thinking. In Alaska, there is a path that's a long path across the continent. And there's a sign right at the beginning of that path. And it says, choose your ruts wisely, because you will be in them for a long time. Choose your ruts wisely. Choose your paradigms wisely. I recommend a spiritual mind. We'll talk about it. I'm just touching on stuff right now. We'll talk about it.